I believe we have Senator Carper on the web, and then Senator Carper would be followed by Senator Cassidy, who's here. Senator Carper, are you out there in cyberspace?
Here. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
All right. Good. To our nominees, congratulations on your nomination. Thank you for appearing today, and for all your families across the world who are listening as well. I would like to start off with a question I could for Ms. Pagan, dealing with the WTO reform. Ms. Pagan, I've always felt it's if something isn't perfect, we ought to work to make it better. And there's been a great deal of conversation, really, on both sides of the aisle and across the globe about the need for reforms in the WTO. And we know that the WTO has an important role to play in combating unfair trade practices that persist in non-market economies like China. Unfortunately, the organization continues to face challenges with its dispute settlement system, including the lack of quorum on the appellate body that has weakened the WTO's enforcement. My question is this, Ms. Pagan. In your opinion, what strategy should our country take, the U.S. take, to reforming the WTO and addressing the inoperability of the WTO's appellate body? Please, go right ahead.
Thank you, Senator Carper. The good thing is that we all agree, I think there's consensus that the WTO and particularly the appellate body need to be reformed. I guess on the other hand, we all have different views of what reform means, in particularly with respect to the appellate body. What we want, and if confirmed, what I will work hard to do is to have conversations so that we can restore the appellate body and the dispute settlement system to what we thought we had agreed to. We never intended the appellate body to be a rulemaking body. We believe that rules have to be enforced, but it has to be the rules as they were negotiated and agreed by the members. So USTR has been having these conversations, and we will continue to have these conversations, and I suspect that we spend a lot of time having these conversations with our counterparts at the WTO to make sure that we can restore the appellate body and the system to the way that we envisioned it at the beginning. And I don't think it's going to be an easy conversation, but it's something that I look forward to doing while I'm there.
All right. Thanks, Ms. Pagan. My second question would be for Mr. Nyman, Mr. Wilson, and also for you, Ms. Pagan. And for each of you, we'll start off with Mr. Nyman. But I want to begin by, again, thank you for joining us and for your willingness to serve our country. These are important roles. We know that and appreciate it. But one of the biggest questions facing our country, I think it's facing our planet, is how to work collectively to address our shared problems. And you may have heard an old African-American proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, travel together. And goals like tackling climate change, like tackling this pandemic, and expanding economic prosperity require global cooperation. Unfortunately, the previous administration all too often turned away from multilateral engagement and ultimately ceded U.S. leadership on the global stage in a number of instances. Here's my question, starting with Mr. Nyman. Should you be confirmed, you'll represent the U.S. before international organizations and within multilateral negotiations. How do you view your role within the broader effort to rebuild U.S. leadership on the global stage? Mr. Nyman, would you lead us off, please? And then Mr. Wilson, and then Ms. Pagan. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator, for your question. The role to which I've been nominated for, I view as playing a key role in Treasury's macroeconomic engagement with the rest of the world, whether bilaterally, country by country, or through multilateral institutions like the international financial institutions, the G7, the G20. And I'm very supportive of the President's goal of restoring America's global standing and leadership in these institutions. One good example, I think, that you mentioned in your question is our efforts, including, for example, through multilateral development banks, to encourage decarbonization efforts, since that's a good example of a problem that, of course, only really has a global solution. So that's an example of one way in which I would think about your question, and if confirmed, Senator, I'd happy to work with you and your staff and hear about other ideas you have on asserting U.S. leadership in these organizations.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nyman. Mr. Wilson, please, same question.
Thank you, Senator Carper. I've been privileged during my years at USTR to serve in a couple of roles that have been diplomatic in character. I worked as a diplomat representing USTR in Brussels, and then more recently at the WTO in Geneva. I'm a believer in diplomacy, and I'm a very strong believer in the power of building personal relationships to be able to advance policy objectives. And if confirmed, I look forward to applying those skills to the task of rebuilding U.S. leadership. Thanks.
Thank you for that response. Mr. Chairman, do we have a few seconds for Ms. Pagan to briefly respond?
Sure.
Thanks. Ms. Pagan, just briefly, please.
Thank you. As Ambassador Tai recently said, the United States is committed to the WTO. If confirmed, it certainly would be an honor for me to represent the United States there. There are a lot of challenges like climate change and many other things that need to be collectively addressed, and I will do my best to represent the U.S. interests at the WTO.
All right. Thanks for those responses, and thanks for your willingness to serve. Good luck.